Welcome to episode 90. Got my man, aka Fresh Kills.
What's up?
Represent. Can you let the listeners and audiences know a little bit about yourself?
Sure. I'm known as Fresh Kils. My last name is Andrew. My last name is Kilgore, and so growing up, I had a lot of nicknames, and so everyone called me Kills for a really long time. And then when I started making beats, somebody said, "Yo, these beats are fresh," and it was so I became Fresh Kills.
Hey.
Um, but it's so to think about it, it's a double entendre. I'm saying this to say that a lot of people think my name is violent in nature, and yeah, it's fun to have the double entendre, but it would be like calling yourself Fresh Ivan or Fresh Dave or Fresh Matthew, you know. So yeah, I'm known as Fresh Kills. I'm first and foremost an engineer, and I want to say that because I feel like not a lot of people, or not as many people, know that because of the viral nature of me being on the pads and the performer that I like became later on. But I started out as a producer, sorry, as an engineer and a record producer with my 4 track back in the 90s. This is episode 90. I'm beaming in from the 90s as we spoke about my lighting, my camera. I've got a 90s retro vibe to me. Um, but yeah, so being an engineer for a long time, working in the studio. I've been running my studio now for 20-ish years. Um, and uh, and then obviously record producer, two multi Juno nominated producer and engineer,
Woo!
and then of course I'm known for hitting them, living on the pads of the MPC, which became my instrument, and won a couple battles. I became the Sound Battle Royale champion in 2012, and shortly after that got a booking deal with an agency that kept me on the road for a lot of years. So I'm a well traveled um, performer, engineer, producer, and yeah, and podcast guest. Jeez.
Sheesh. Speaking of time traveling, let's go a bit of to your childhood.
Mm,
How was childhood for you?
wow, that's a good question. Um, I feel I feel pretty lucky. I grew up in a pretty nice neighborhood, really supportive, parents. My dad wanted to be like he was a I think he got to he was an 8th grade Royal Conservatory piano player,
Wow.
but never never pursued it, and that was just never going to be a reality for him, and so he went a totally different path. And so I feel lucky in that I kind of feel like my dad especially, but my mom and my dad, they've been really supportive of me, and in my dad's case, I may be living he may be living vicariously through my life, which is a life that he might not have had the ability to kind of pursue the path that I've chosen. So, um, pretty good, man. My parents are
Like,
together. My
yeah.
mom's the mom. Like, my mom
Mom's
was
mama.
my
Yeah.
mom's like the mom where like you'd come over and like everyone would be jealous of my mom because she would like hug them and make them food, and so I really can't get over, like, I'm probably one of the luckiest and most privileged human beings. Of course, being a white cisgendered male doesn't hurt. Like, you're just tacking privilege on top of privilege on top of privilege here, um, which I might say is not lost on me, and I've done my best to kind of work as hard as I could to kind of deserve some of the things that I was lucky enough to have. Um,
Can you share some of like the childhood memories, special memories?
let's see, special memories. Um, uh, I was a Defiant kid, so and I don't know really what that's about other than my mom can get spicy. Like my mom talks back, and my mom can be loud.
Yeah.
Um but I have a lot of memories of being kind of defiant in the face of like, like I was dating one of my first girlfriends was how might you say this? She was she was not petite, let's say.
Yeah.
And I remember being on a bus, and the entire bus of dudes were like making fun of me for dating my girl Tiana, who, the irony of that at the time was that there was this really classically hot girl that was interested in me. And I remember meeting her and just being like, not really into her. And Tiana was like hilarious, and we had so much fun together. And so I just remember like an entire bus of dudes making fun of me for dating this girl, and specifically not dating the other girl, which was defying everybody's expectations of me. And so,
Yeah.
and I remember just kind of being like middle fingers up at everybody about it, just being like, screw off. So, so there's that. And I guess I'm saying, I'm highlighting that to say the following, which is that I definitely zigged when everybody zagged. That was a real thing for me. I resented the popularity contest. Like I hated the jocks. I hated the, like, I was such a contrarian with that stuff. Like, people used to say, I remember people would say I was bitter. Why are you so bitter? And I'd be like, you beat up a kid in the locker room last week because of, for no reason, and now I'm being bitter because I don't want to hang out with you. Or I don't like
Yeah.
you. Like,
Yeah.
you're a dick. Like, what is different in a week?
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and I feel like the reason I'm saying that, all that is, and why that story, and maybe why you're asking too, is that ending up on the NPC and ending up where I've ended up has been a very much a process of, if everybody's into it, I'm not into it. If everybody's thinks something's dope, I'm immediately suspicious. I'm
Mhm.
immediately suspicious of successful people to my own detriment. I'm immediately successful of things that are hot, of things that are popular, of things that are of things that are that everyone's,
Yeah.
and that's not to say that I'm like a contrarian conspiracy theorist type of person. Like, I lead with compassion
Yeah.
and an understanding. I try to inform my devil's advocacy. I'm not just like a devil's advocate to be a devil's
Yeah.
advocate. But you know, last thing I'll say, like, everyone was wanted to be a DJ. Everyone wanted to be an MC. I was like, nah.
Yeah. Yeah. At that time.
Nobody's on the NPC. Like, nobody's doing this pad stuff really. Or there were a couple of people that were incredible, like Gel and Exile, and there were a couple, but very very few. And I ended up just kind of through that pathway of like not doing what everybody was doing. Ended up kind of forging my own
And what
thing.
was like the some of the struggles you had growing up?
Struggles. I mean, there were struggles with being the contrarian, right? So like
Yeah.
being
Yeah.
the,
Like you were saying. Yes.
kind of going my own way with things. Um, I mean, I was made fun of. My last name just made. I was so mercilessly made fun of for my last name all the time.
Mm.
I had so many nicknames because my last name being Kilgore, it was just like the target of all targets for kids to
Yeah.
call me whatever the hell they wanted. I mean, I have so many of them. There was like, they flipped the L and the I, so they called me Cligor,
Oh, yeah.
Cligor. They called me, because I had the initials AK. I was Aka Cligor at some point. Then I was Aka. Then I was Axe. Then I was Axel. Then I was just Rose. They just called me Rose because it was Axl Rose from Guns N' Roses. They just called me Rose for a while. Uh, they would sing the song, "Hang on, Sloopy, hang on, Sloopy, Sloopy, hang on." It was "Hang on, Killy, Killy, hang on." So I was
Like,
Killy for a while. I was Killy G. I was Killy Jesus. I was Killsy. I
yeah.
mean, it was
On and on
totally.
and on.
It was just relentless. But but yeah, that was a thing. I mean, I think the other thing, like coming into university, I feel like one of the things that, because I was so defiant when I was a kid, and I, like, um, I got into this prestigious high school, and I didn't want to go because all my friends were going somewhere else, and my parents just forced me to go because they were like, "You need to go," and I hated it. I just was like, this place is bullshit. This is a bunch of rich kids. This is stupid. These people are ridiculous.
Yeah.
Um,
Being the person you were.
yeah, and then on top of it, they're like bad people. Like, yeah, okay, you're driving your dad's Beamer to school. Screw you for that. But then you want to be a dick? Like, this is intolerable. Um, so, like, I was forced to go. So I was defiant the whole way, and I feel like my mother was a refugee from Hungary, and so I want to give her a little bit of credit here because she survived living behind the Iron Curtain. She survived
Yeah.
Nazi occupation. She survived Russian occupation, and like, so she has this like, you know, fight or flight response to certain things. And she takes politics pretty seriously. Like when I remember when I was a kid, my mother was like, when we entered the Desert Storm War or whatever, the Iraq War, my mom was like screaming. She was throwing stuff around the house. She was so angry. And I'm saying all this to say that that like that kind of, that attitude, like I definitely had some of that attitude, the rage against the machine kind of attitude. And then when I got to university, that rage against the machine attitude like kind of worked against me for a while. And it was like, because I would judge people, right? I was judgmental because of it, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
um and I was also very protective of being prejudged. Like if you you know, maybe if you knew that I was from a nice neighborhood, you would second guess me, or you would dismiss me. And I was so sensitive to that. And so university was sort of that a really big readjustment of that, where I was like, okay, uh I've got to like chill, you know, like
Yeah,
I've got to lead with compassion and understanding. And like I can't I can't be condescending to somebody because I have some kind of prejudgment about them, you
yeah,
know.
yeah,
um and I got checked on that, you know, and thankfully I had people around me that loved me and cared enough about me to check me on that, and not just kind of let me be a, you know,
yeah.
kind of like I don't know what you want to call it. I mean, university is such a great place to be like a kind of leftist intellectual revolutionary person. Like you're reading, you know, like I took philosophy classes. I read I read poetry. I read political science. I read all these things. And so it's very, you know, I read Nietzsche. Like I love Nietzsche. Like I was such, oh yes, nihilism is so juicy and yummy. Like let's burn the house down, you know, like yes, you know, like let's burn some cop cars, man. Like, you know, I was part of the G8 summit uh rally in Halifax when they had the G8. And I had a blast, man. And there was like a helicopter following us the whole time. And I was like, there's no way a helicopter is following us. That's ridiculous. And then every time I looked up in the sky, because we were driving the truck with the PA system on the back, of course, I was a sound man for the thing. Every time I looked up in the sky, there was a helicopter. I was like, there's no way. There's no way. Um, anyways, that's a long answer to your question, but you know,
Yeah.
the readjustment in university has helped. And then
Was that the beginning when you were being an engineer to what you are now?
what was funny, what's interesting about that question is when I was in high school, I played guitar. I was a
Yeah,
long-haired hippie guitar player.
yeah, hippie. Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
I really didn't like hip hop too. I was not into hip hop. I was like, and again, it was one of
Really?
those.
Okay.
Well, it wasn't dissimilar from my other Defiant moments where I was like, well, everybody's into this like fad thing.
Yeah, yeah,
And I was like, my friend played me like Insane in the Membrane, and I was just like, this is trash to me. At the time, it was trash. I did not hear it. I didn't get it. I didn't want to get it. I was like, okay, whatever. Um, so for me, it was a much more circuitous route to like enjoying hip hop music, which we can talk about. But the reason I'm mentioning all that is that I had a 4-track. I was a guitar player, and like singer songwriter 4-track singer songwriters of that time, you'd have a 4-track so you could put ideas down. You know, you could record stuff. So I got a 4-track, and I would be, you know, making songs, layering things, and mixing stuff on my little 4-track thing. And so when I went to university, and I met Fester, was one of my he was one of my floor mates. And the thing that became important, it wasn't that I decided to be an engineer so much as when I engaged the local, like the people that were around me, like the artists that were around me and people in Halifax that were doing stuff, nobody was engineering. Like nobody knew how to do it. And it was sort of one of those things where like you're sort of searching for your purpose. You're searching for like, okay, well, how do I contribute? How do I be a part of this?
yeah.
How do I help? You know, how do we move this thing forward or whatever? What's my role? And I had a 4-track. And so I became the de facto engineer. And it meant, you know, like learning, downloading Cool Edit Pro, learning it, bringing the 4-track, recording sessions, um, and just, okay, let's get a microphone, let's get a booth, let's get, you know, like just trying to figure it all out. And that sort of became my role. Um, in essence, because nobody else really wanted. I don't say no one else wanted to do it, but it's. I mean, even now, engineering records isn't like the most,
No, it's not.
seductive. Uh, you know, I'm just gonna grab my coffee. I'm sorry, I'm
Okay,
destabilizing
it's
your
okay.
thing. Yeah, it's not the most like seductive role to play, right? Everybody
Yeah,
wants to be the artist or the DJ or um, whatever role. And so engineering was kind of like, it's not even that it's a thankless job or whatever, but it wasn't a job. It was a job that people were maybe less passionate about. So it was an easy role for me to step into. I mean, it was nice in that, again, zigging when everybody's zagging, right? Like
yeah,
I
yeah,
don't have any competition as an engineer in university in Halifax in 1999 or 99. There's no other engineers, right? Like
yeah, yeah, yeah.
it's not like everybody wanted to be a DJ in the early 2000s in Halifax, and it's like you go to a show and there's like a young scratch bastard like destroying everybody, right? And you're just like, holy. And then you look at your friends that are trying to be DJs and they're terrible, and I'm like, well, I don't want to be one of those terrible DJs calling themselves a DJ when they probably shouldn't be. And I'm witnessing bastard the birth of a turntable god, right? I'm like, well, I can't be him because he's. So I'm like, I'm just not gonna bother. I'm gonna go this way. And so the engineering was also part of that kind of defiant, like everybody's doing this, let's go this way. And I want to say too, I would be lying if I said that wasn't partially motivated by fear and partially motivated. Like it's a safer.
Yeah, yeah. Flight
You'd
or
like to
flight
think that
from
it's
your
actually, yeah. Like, so I'm sorry to cut you.
ancestral
Well,
baggage or
you'd like to think, right? Like you think, oh, I'm so defiant. I'm a trailblazer. I'm like this fearless. I'm going to do stuff that no one's doing. It's actually much safer to do that
yeah,
because if you're in the competition bowl, you're going to get run over,
yeah.
and who wants that?
Comfort zone.
That's right.
Yeah. So how did you get like magnetic force towards your purpose? How was that? Like how did that happen?
Well, what would you consider my purpose? Which one? What's the?
From engineer to what you're doing right now.
I mean, I'm still engineering. That's the main.
Okay.
That's the main thing. That's
Okay,
I mean,
okay.
running the studio. So like, you might consider my purpose to be flailing around on the pads on stage,
Yeah, yeah.
right? Um, I mean,
But what would you say your purpose is, I guess then?
well, the purpose that I stated to myself
Yeah.
at whatever point it was, and I probably would say it was around that time in Halifax when I was sort of starting and figuring things out, um, is that I did not want to be an artist. That was a main thing for me that I at the time was like, I don't want to be an artist. I don't want to live and die by my creativity. I want to like
Yeah,
no, I mean I tried writing songs. I would write songs
yeah,
for my girlfriends. I hated writing songs. I like writing a song. It's like, oh god, it's so hard because like the words are so heavy
yeah.
and it's like you'd be like, oh, okay, like it's raining in Baltimore, and you're like, okay, like what does that mean? Like writing songs is really really hard. Um, I didn't love it, but I loved being part of the process. I loved the. I was like, I want to be part of the process of helping people direct what they're doing. I want to be. I want to. I just want to be in it. I want to be part of it. I want to help people. Um, not just because I have so much and I have the ability to help people, but also because it's just like that's more fulfilling than being like, hey, look at me kind of stuff all the time. I didn't really that wasn't interesting to me, like the popularity game of it wasn't interesting to me, but
It's
like
like aligning your value with your purpose.
right. I think the other thing too, like I'll give Fester this credit. Um, when Fester started showing me what sampling was, and like here's a song that you like, but here's where the drums came from. You know, like you know, here's where the bass line for your favorite like Chemical Brothers song came from. Because that was the other thing. I didn't jump into hip hop right away. I was getting into things like Portishead and Beck and Chemical Brothers. So like if you listen to Portishead, there's a ton of hip hop production. I mean, that's like a hip hop record. Those records are super hip hop production, right? Same thing with Beck, right? Beck's working with the Dust Brothers. Those guys were sampling tons of records. So like Fester's like prying open my third eye with this. Hey, like these drums on this song that you've loved for the last 5 years of your life are on a record that your dad has in his record collection. And I'm going like, what? So that level of discovery and that meta layer behind production was
Yeah,
just
yeah.
like, oh my God, like this is so fascinating, endlessly fascinating, like endlessly fascinating rabbit holes of like, oh, like, like I remember, this is a stupid one, but this is like a funny one that I remember. You know that song Butterfly? Uh, You're my butterfly, come, come, my lady, and
Oh, I think so.
that silly, dumb song by, I can't remember the name of the band. Uh, anyways, dumb
There we
song.
go.
You know
Yeah.
that song? Butterfly? It's terrible.
No, I don't think so.
It's like, you're my butterfly, come, come, my lady, whatever. Anyways, terrible pop song. The snare is from this funk record. And I like started to recognize production. I was like, oh my God, like that's the Skull Snap snare. And I know that snare. And I'm like, holy, like that. They're in the studio sampling funk records. That's crazy. Um, so you want to talk about the purpose, like that, like delving into the innards of it was, I mean, I don't know what you want to say purpose, like it just became endlessly
Yeah.
fascinating to me, and like I just wanted to know everything, and it was so fun. um I loved digging for records, I loved finding stuff. It was like this quest, it's like a permanent quest, they say give men quests.
Like you were the kid, always like looking for shiny things and happy and
Yeah, I mean, it's also like you're walking in the shadow of your heroes, right? Like you'll find a record and you'd be like, "Oh my God, like Jay Dilla was here." Like that's an exciting moment when you find an old record and you're like, like I was in Lawrence, Kansas, and I bought this Giorgio Moroder record, uh, and he's like this Italian electronic producer, and I'm going through and I'm like, this sounds familiar, like something about this. Literally the last noise, the last sound on the B side, the last song of the record is energy equals MC squared.
yeah.
And it's the Dilla. And I was like, yeah, like you can't,
Yeah, yeah.
you kind of like that moment. You can't recreate that moment. It's even hard. I mean, I can describe it to you, but like,
Being in that moment, it's totally different.
I
Yeah.
mean, I had to go all the way to Lawrence, Kansas and digging records. This record looks cool. And days later, I'm listening to it. I'm like, yo, it sounds familiar. Like that journey is it's unbelievable. It's just unbelievable. Like, I don't know. I just had so much fun doing it. So, my purpose, I'll get back to answer your question, which is I became obsessed with that stuff and doing it and making stuff. And, uh, production, the thing about where my production stuff really came from and was that I played guitar. I was a classically trained clarinet player
Oh,
in
okay.
high school, which you'd think like what does that mean? Like doesn't mean much. But I was musically trained. So when I was making beats, like
You were
my
already
mentor,
musically tuned. Yeah.
6'2", for example, who's like one of the all-time, for me, one of the greatest Canadian producers of all time, and like unbelievable, just a genius level on everything. Like he's incredible visual artist. He's an incredible sonic artist. He's just fascinating person, insanely intelligent. He would make a beat and then he would put records on and listen to find stuff that worked, right? And he would
Mm.
wait for a record to play something over top of a beat he was playing. Oh, that works. Let me use that, right?
Oh, wow.
So
Yeah,
I was musically trained, so I could literally take any two sounds. That's in the key of G flat. That's in the key of E. Drop it 3 semitones. Bang! Like I was immediately way more musical than a lot of my contemporaries at the time, like my friends right away. So my beats were decent. and in a compositional way, they were just musical. They had a musical depth to them. I didn't know how to do drums and stuff, but that definitely kind of helped guide my purpose to becoming a producer. Like the producer that I am today is very much shaped by that, by this like just the musicality of things. Because I wasn't like I didn't have the hottest drums at the time. I did not, I'm not like the best trap hi hat programmer. My sound design is okay. Um, but the musicality is a thing for me. So
Yeah, cool. Amazing. I love that passion of yours and
jeez,
how you storytell. To end off our segment, what would you say being limitless means to you?
being limitless. Hmm.
Take
Well,
your time.
you're limitless. I suppose limitless in the true sense is internal. You know, um, whereas externally, everything externally is limited. So your mind is limitless, but your output is you have a limited amount of time on the earth. You have a limited amount of output. Um, yeah. I wonder about like I'm older now, so I wonder about legacy. Right.
Mm,
These talks about what's
yeah,
your legacy going to be, and that's always a weird question because when you're in the moment, sometimes that's not really like you can't really always afford to think that way, right? Um, and that may mean, you know, let's say you were thinking about your legacy. Well, that may mean you'd make certain decisions differently, right? Like maybe I should have done this show even
yeah,
though they
yeah,
weren't
yeah.
paying me enough or whatever. Like there's certain things. Um, and I don't think that legacies are forever either. I mean, I don't have any
No, no, it's
reason
not.
to believe.
Nothing's set on stone.
Yeah, and history is rewritten all the time. So like how hard do you want to fight for your page in the history book? I don't know. I don't know if I've earned one or not. I don't know. I mean, if you were like, I know again, we're in the moment, so it's hard to talk about it,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
like,
of course.
would I be in the book of finger drummer
Yeah,
pioneers or something? Like, I don't know. Maybe not. Um, maybe. But so we tend to want to say, I mean, I'm saying that to say, like, we tend to think of our legacies as limitless, right? Like, okay, well, if I work hard enough and I'll have a page in history that will last forever. Um, I don't know if I believe that that's possible. So yeah, I mean, your internal is kind of limitless, and as David Lynch would say, you know, rest in peace. He would direct us to tap into that as much as possible, um,
the
because
limitless
that's
internal energy. Okay,
yeah, whether
got it.
that's like meditation, right? However you
Yeah, yeah.
tap into it, but he would say, for example, that your truest self is there somewhere. Your truest self isn't out here, so I
Yeah,
might
yeah.
subscribe to that. I don't know. Obviously, I'm
Yeah.
I'm watching and I'm in taking too much Lynch these days because he's passed. So now I'm like, oh,
Yeah. I love that. I love that. Thank you so
sure.
much for coming on and
Thanks for
sharing
having
your
me. I
insights and
appreciate you.
stories.
Cheers, man.
See ya.